My name is Evan Bode. I use any pronouns, and I'm a filmmaker, especially interested in animation and kind of combining animation with live action. I think from a very early age I was interested in filmmaking. I would kind of draw, like even as a toddler, after I would watch a film, I would draw what I saw in the film on kind of pages, and then my parents kept those, so we have like several boxes in my room full of just stacks of paper from that. It seemed like kind of a form of writing, like creating picture books, but I think I was kind of doing a form of filmmaking in the only way that I kind of knew how without the technology as a little kid. Animation was something that I'd always loved watching and always was interested in, but I never actually did it until I came to Syracuse and was in the grad program. And even for my first year film, I was planning on doing something live action, but because of the pandemic, I was at home and kind of working in my parents' basement, just kind of individually in isolation. And then animation made a lot of sense to try out doing stop motion. So I tried stop motion for the first time kind of that semester and created Thine Own Self for my first year film, and found that it was something that was kind of amazingly expressive, and there was a lot of creative freedom within that art form to work with. I chose to use both animation and live action in a lot of my projects because I feel that you can do a lot when you move away from kind of realism and into a mode that understands itself as something that is constructed. 'Cause a lot of times filmmakers are kind of striving for this illusion of realism and striving to kind of make you forget that you're watching a film. But with animation, it kind of takes you back out and reminds you that you're watching a film and reminds you that what you're watching was created by somebody, which I think is really interesting. So I like kind of work that embraces its own artifice or embraces its own nature as a fabrication, which animation can do so beautifully because it's drawn and it shows kind of the hand of the artist, I guess. And it reminds us it's not just kind of a objective universal viewpoint, but it's something that's subjective and coming from an author who's working often like by hand to create these visions that aren't necessarily tied to realism. I think that to see something that blends styles on the viewer, it hopefully kind of unlocks a part of the mind that's not always active when you're viewing other films. That's like wondering, what is this supposed to represent? Why are there drawings on the screen? And in my work, I'm trying to kind of talk about art at the same time as I'm making art. So like in A Spot for Frog, I have a character who's an artist and who loves to draw things, and so I think seeing their drawings being incorporated might impact the viewer in a way that you're thinking like, what does that mean for this character, and what might be going on inside the character's head that the drawings are representing. So it's kind of a form of like very self-conscious filmmaking that's thinking about itself as a drawing, as a piece of moving artwork that might get people thinking about art and artistic practices. I think that Thine Own Self was really the first film where I started exploring that. And I felt like this sort of visual shorthand of pink and blue was a perfect way to kind of represent a binary in a way that people would immediately kind of understand, because it's so embedded in our culture that there's these two and only two categories that are imposed on people from the time they're born, even before they're born, with gender reveal parties or things like that. This sets into motion this kind of set of expectations onto someone. And so I was interested in kind of breaking free from that, in part from kind of my own sense of not feeling completely at home within traditional masculinity, and kind of feeling that gender and identity is something that's more expansive and complicated than this kind of dichotomy that our culture presents to people. So I think that it can kind of convey internal realities when you're drawing it and you're using kind of like metaphorical imagery and things that Because identity is something that's very kind of abstract in a certain sense, and it's not always visible in the way that we read other people. We can kind of make assumptions about them based on what we see. We never know what someone's internal kind of reality is, and animation can kind of bring out inner thoughts and feelings that you don't see right away in other sort of recordings of live action. So. I hope it means something to people, and I think that if it has to start with meaning something to me, that as filmmakers, if your work doesn't mean something to you, it probably won't mean anything to other people, but if it means something to you, chances are it'll resonate out there with other people who can relate to what you're thinking about and talking about. If we recognize that the world around us is constructed in a certain way, we can also recognize that we can construct it differently, that we have the power kind of collectively to create the world that we want to create. Hopefully in my work I can advocate for a world where people feel more of a sense of safety and belonging to be themselves. Yeah, just general messages of inclusivity and compassion are really important to me, and kind of exercising the audience's heart muscles in a way is kind of how I think of that. So ideally I would love for my work to make people feel kind of seen and heard, and also a sense of compassion for ourselves and each other, and kind of an encouragement to embrace authentic selfhood, even if that's outside of what's traditionally kind of been accepted in society. So moving toward sort of brighter possibilities for a more inclusive future is the message that I hope to convey.